So I got to tell you, Texas Christmas is one of my favorite Sundays of the year. What do y'all think? We get to sing some of my favorite songs in my favorite style of music. So hope you guys enjoyed it as much as I did. Thank you to all of our musicians, to all the hard work that they put in to make this a very special Sunday and a very special service. And one more reminder, if you have not gotten a churro, listen, you're missing out. You're going to regret it. Don't face lasting regrets and get a churro, okay, before the morning is over. Glad you're here. Glad you're worshiping with us this morning. So right now at Zion, we're in the middle of a series that we are calling Gift Exchange. And kind of the big idea behind this series is this. One of the time-honored traditions of this time of year is to exchange gifts with friends, family members, and loved ones. And some of these gift exchanges are like very personal, very poignant, very sweet. When you buy that perfect gift for your husband or your wife and you give it to them, and you know it's the perfect gift because when they open it, a little tear comes to their eye and they get a little choked up. That's like the perfect gift exchange moment. Or when you buy a gift for your kid or for your grandkid that they've been asking you for, not just this holiday season, but since last holiday season. And when they finally get it, they grin ear to ear and they start running all over the house, shrieking with delight. That's one of those precious gift exchange moments. Now, of course, not every gift exchange moment is quite like those moments, right? We have the more laid back, more goofy moments like the white elephant gift exchange at the office. Anybody ever been a part of one of those? Where like everybody just digs through all the junk they've been keeping in their closet for years, pull it out, they wrap it up, you dump it on the conference table, and everybody gets to pick one gift, a mystery gift. And the goal at these gift exchanges is not even to get a good gift, it is just to get the least bad gift, right? This is what we do this time of year. We like to exchange gifts. Now, the idea of a gift exchange, this actually goes all the way back to the very first Christmas ever. Because in the very first Christmas, God himself wanted to do a gift exchange with us. He wanted to give us all of his good gifts of peace and life and salvation and hope and joy. But here's the problem. When it came to the gifts that we had to give to him, they weren't so good. They were things like sin and shame and guilt and regrets and pain. And yet, even with the worst stuff that we had to give to God, God was more than willing to exchange our worst for his best. And that's what this series is all about. And so today, as we continue our series, we're going to be taking a look at how God wants to give us a gift. And here's the gift he wants to give to us. He wants to give to us his hope. And here's the exchange he's willing to make. He is willing to exchange his hope for our doubts. Now, we're going to start on the doubt side of that gift exchange, our doubts. I don't care who you are or how long you've been walking with Jesus or how many years you've been coming to church or how religious you present yourself to be. My guess is there's not a single one of us in this room this morning who somewhere over the course of their lives has not struggled in some way, shape, form, or fashion with at least a shred of doubts. Doubts even when it comes to God. Now, for some people, their doubt kind of takes on an academic tinge, right? These are the people who read the Bible and kind of see miraculous things happening, and they go, I kind of doubt that, right? I need more evidence of that before I'm going to believe in that. But for a lot of people, doubt isn't quite so academic. For a lot of people, doubt is a little bit more personal. You know how this works. You go to the doctor and you get that one diagnosis that begins with a C, and all of a sudden your whole world begins to collapse around you. And because you're so scared and worried, you actually begin by leaning into your faith. And you pray and pray and pray, and you say to God, God, take this disease away. But the tumor doesn't shrink, it just grows. And you begin to experience and struggle with doubts. And you even begin to wonder, you even begin to ask, God, do you care? Or maybe you go even farther and you ask, God, are you even there? That's the kind of doubt that I want to spend some time talking about today. Now, to get at this struggle that we have with doubt, we're going to be taking a look at a story from the Gospel of Luke, chapter 1. It's the story of a man named Zechariah. And Zechariah, just like so many of us, was a man who struggled with doubt. Here's his story, Luke 1, beginning at verse 5. In the time of Herod, king of Judea, and already I need to pause right there and set just a little bit of context here for you, because Luke gives us a little bit of context. Zechariah's story begins during the rule and the reign of a king named Herod. Now, we know this from the Bible, but we also know this from sources outside of the Bible. Herod was one of the most malicious kings in the history of the world. In fact, Herod was one of the most megalomaniacal rulers to have ever existed. Herod was a man who, maybe here's a good way to put it, he didn't really hold his power loosely. In fact, he was very paranoid that everybody was basically out to steal his power. And so, for example, Herod had 10 wives, most of whom were political trophy wives. He actually executed the first wife because he was worried that she was trying to steal his throne. He banished his second wife because he was worried that she also was trying to steal his throne. He killed one of his mothers-in-law. He killed one of his brothers-in-law. He killed 3 of his own sons because he was scared and worried that all of them were trying to steal his power and usurp his throne. There was another ruler who lived during Herod's day and age in the first century. His name was Caesar Augustus. Anybody ever heard of him? He was the emperor of Rome, and he was said to have remarked that I'd rather be Herod's pig than Herod's son, because Caesar Augustus knew all that Herod had done, and he figured if he was going to be in the family of Herod, he would have a better chance of surviving on Herod's farm than in Herod's family, because that's how awful Herod was. And so, it's during the rule and the reign of this guy, back to Luke 1 verse 5, that we meet this couple. There is this priest whose name is Zechariah, and he has a wife named Elizabeth, who was a descendant of Aaron. And so we have this couple, Zechariah and Elizabeth, and the best way to think of this couple is that they were kind of like a first century church power couple. Zechariah, he was a professional church worker. He served as a priest, which meant that he worked at the temple in Jerusalem. He would lead services and offer sacrifices. And then he was married to this gal named Elizabeth. And one of the things that Luke says about Elizabeth is that she was actually a descendant of a guy named Aaron. Now, Aaron is one of the most famous figures in the Old Testament because he was the original priest for and to the people in the nation of Israel. And so he was like the progenitor of the whole Jewish priesthood, and Elizabeth was related to that guy. And so Zechariah and Elizabeth, because he was a professional church worker, she was related to Aaron. This couple had an amazing religious pedigree. But not only that, they were also very religiously pious. In fact, if you keep on going, verse 6 of Luke 1, it says that both of them were righteous in the sight of God, and they observed all the Lord's commands and all the Lord's decrees blamelessly. In other words, inside of Zechariah and Elizabeth, there wasn't even a shred of hypocrisy. They dotted every religious I, crossed every religious T. In the words of the great theologian Mary Poppins, Zechariah and Elizabeth were practically perfect in every way. That's how good they were. But for their amazing religious pedigree and for all of their amazing religious piety, Zechariah and Elizabeth had a problem. And here is their problem, verse 7. They were childless because Elizabeth was not able to conceive. And they were both very old. So Zechariah and Elizabeth, when they first get married, they have all the dreams that a normal young couple have. They want to get married, and they want the kids to start rolling in, so they try, to have kids, but it never really seems to go well for them. And so they start getting a little bit nervous and a little bit concerned. So they go to the doctor, ask the doctor what's wrong. They try all the tricks. They take the fish oil because that's supposed to help with fertility. But no matter what they do or how hard they try, Elizabeth can't seem to get pregnant. They can't seem to have a baby. And month after month goes by, and year after year, then decade after decade. And by the time we meet this couple in Luke chapter 1, both of their biological clocks have ticked way past baby. And so they just kind of figure it's not in the cards for them. They just figure they're going to die without any kids and without any grandkids. And of course, this was a very painful experience for them. In fact, they asked the question that all of us ask when we really want something, but we can't seem to quite get something. It's just a one-word question. You know what it is? Why? Why? Why is it that in our younger years, we had all of these friends, and they were having babies. They had 1 kid, 2 kids, 3 kids. They had a whole basketball team full of kids, and we couldn't even have a single kid. Why? Why did this happen to us? Maybe you've asked the question too. Maybe for you it's a little bit different. Maybe you're in your 20s and you're experiencing all sorts of medical difficulties, and you got all your friends who are like living these great lives and going to all of these places, and you're stuck in hospital rooms or in doctor's offices, and you get a little bitter and a little jealous of your friends, and you go, why? Why is it that they get to have all of this fun, and I feel like my life, because of my medical conditions, is already done? Why? Or maybe for you, you're getting all those Christmas cards this time of year. You know the ones with the glossy family photos where everybody's grinning ear to ear and they look really happy. They're the epitome of what joy to the world looks like. And yet you have that prodigal son or that prodigal daughter who you can't even get to be a part of your family photo, much less smile for your family photo. And you ask the question, why? Why is it that my family can't look like their family? This is a question that we all ask, but here's what you need to know about this question. This is a question that also sows seeds of doubt. And here's why. Right beneath this question, why, is actually kind of an accusation of God. Because what you're really saying to God is, God, I don't think you're doing your job, at least not the way that I want you to, which means I'm going to begin to doubt you. And that's what Zechariah and Elizabeth are struggling with. Now, just like so many people who struggle with doubt, it's not that they walk away from the church altogether. They don't reject their religion or anything like that, but they do begin to fall into this pattern where they're just kind of going through the motions. Because that one prayer that they wanted answered from God to give them a baby more than any other prayer has never been answered, and it will never be answered. And so they just kind of settle in to their religiosity. Until one day, everything changes for Zechariah and Elizabeth. Luke 1 verse 8, once when Zechariah was serving as a priest before God, he was chosen by Lot to go into the temple of the Lord and to burn some incense. So at the ancient temple in Jerusalem, they had 2 prayer services a day, one in the morning and one in the evening. And the way these prayer services would work is there would be one priest who would be chosen by lot. So think like drawing straws or rolling dice. And so one priest would be chosen by lot to go into the temple and to light the incense, and the smoke would kind of rise up from the incense. And this was meant to be like a physical symbol of the prayers of the priest rising up before God. And whichever priest was chosen to go into the temple to pray, there was this series of 18 benedictions or blessings that all of the priests had memorized that they could rattle off so they could pray to God properly in case they ever got chosen to go into the temple to pray. And on this day, Zechariah's lot comes up. And Zechariah is chosen to go into the temple to pray. Now you also need to know this. This would have represented for Zechariah a once in a lifetime opportunity. In fact, there's this first century historian, his name is Josephus, and he talks about the number of priests who were on the payroll of the temple in Jerusalem in the first century. Josephus says there were about 20,000 priests who served at the temple in Jerusalem in the first century. And you thought that Zion Wahlberg had a lot of pastors, okay? We ain't got nothing on the temple in Jerusalem in the first century. And so the odds against Zechariah were 20,000 to 1. But on this day, he beats the odds. And this actually would have been the moment that Zechariah would have spent his whole professional career preparing for. And so he steps over the threshold of the temple, and he goes into the temple, and he lights the incense, and he begins to pray. He begins to rattle off these 18 benedictions that he's memorized by heart. And Luke 1 verse 10 says that all the assembled worshipers were praying outside. He was the only one inside. But then, in this moment that Zechariah has spent his whole life preparing for, something happens that Zechariah is not prepared for. Verse 11, an angel of the Lord appeared to him, standing right there at the right side of the altar of incense. And when Zechariah saw the angel, he was startled and he was gripped with fear. And of course he was, because going into the temple was supposed to be a religious experience. But this is a little over the top. This is a little ridiculous. But the angel says to him, "Do not be afraid, Zechariah, because your prayer has been heard." Not the 18 benedictions that you're praying right now, but the prayer that you and your wife Elizabeth have prayed like 18,000 times over the years. God has heard that prayer, that the two of you would have a baby. And God's fixing to answer it. Your wife Elizabeth is going to bear you a son. And here, I'll even give you his name. You are to call him John. And he's going to be a joy. And he's going to be a delight to you. All of those baby dreams you kind of gave up on, they're all going to come true. Get ready for the piggyback rides. Get ready for rolling around on the ground with your little son, John. But not only is he going to be a joy to you, he's going to be a joy to like lots of other people too. Many people, the angel says, are going to rejoice in his birth. And here's why, Zechariah. Your son John is going to be kind of a chip off the old block. You're a professional minister. He's going to go into professional ministry too. That's what he's going to do when he's going to grow up, and his ministry is going to be amazing. Verse 16, he's going to bring back many of the people of Israel to the Lord their God. He will turn the hearts of the parents to their children. So families that fall apart, John's going to be able to bring them back together. He's going to turn the disobedience to the wisdom of the righteous. So those who are kind of enslaved to sin and living lives of rebellion, he's going to be able to persuade them to turn back to God and to walk in righteous and holy and better ways. But here's the most amazing thing that your son John is going to do, the angel says to Zechariah. He is actually going to be the one who is going to make ready a people that is prepared for the coming of the Lord. You see, Zechariah, you live at a very unique time in history. Because those questions that you have asked, those questions that everybody asks, God, do you care and are you there? God is fixing to answer those questions, and he's fixing to answer those questions by actually coming here. God is going to come into this world, and the person who is going to prepare the world for God to come is going to be your son, the angel says to Zechariah. Isn't that cool? Isn't that amazing? What do you think of that? To which Zechariah responds, verse 18, I'm not so sure about this. In fact, how can I be sure of this? I mean, look at me. I am an old man, and my wife is... And then Zechariah catches himself, And he goes, oh, wait, well along in years. There we go. That's the way I need to describe it. Now, no matter how he states it, right, we all know what it means. Zechariah is saying to this angel, listen, I may not know much about biology, but me and Elizabeth, we're members of the AARP, which means there ain't no way that we're going to be able to have a baby. And so here is how Zechariah responds to this angel. He responds with doubt. And here's where the story gets very relevant and very personal for you and for me. Because I think that a lot of us really want to believe this about ourselves. We want to believe that if we could just see what Zechariah got to see, or if we could just hear what Zechariah got to hear, all our struggles with doubt, well, we'd be in the clear. If we could just get what Zechariah got, if we could just get some sort of divine sign, then all of our struggles with doubt, they'd be gone and we would be fine. But one of the things that this story teaches us is that it actually wouldn't be just fine. Because one of the things that this story teaches us is that signs can't fix doubt. The sign of an angel could not fix Zechariah's doubt. And signs can't fix our doubt either. And come on, we know this kind of intuitively. Think back to your dating years when you were kind of interested in that one guy or that one girl, and they were giving you all the signs, right? Whenever you looked at them, you got them looking back. Whenever you had a conversation with them, they did the whole little giggle thing because they were really, really nervous talking to you. And then whenever you looked at them and they saw that you were looking at them, what did they do? They began to preen themselves. Okay, so the question is, even with all the signs, did you immediately go over there and ask them out? My guess is you didn't, because you were still a little bit filled with doubt. You were nervous. You were asking questions like, what if I'm misreading the signs? And what if they don't like me after all? Because here's what signs can't fix. Signs can't fix doubt. You see, in order to fix doubt, we need something bigger, better, stronger, longer lasting than just a sign. In order to fix doubt, we need a gift. And here's the gift we need. We need the gift of hope. And I got some good news for you. We have a God who would love to take our doubt and exchange it for his hope. Now, I need to do a little bit of work here and define a term, because a lot of times in 21st century society, when we think of this term hope, we kind of equate it with the term wish, right? And we even use the two interchangeably. We'll say things like, I hope traffic on I-35 isn't too bad on the way home, right? Okay, I got news for you. That hope ain't going to come to pass, because that ain't nothing more than a wish, okay? Or, I hope I win the Mega Millions jackpot. I looked it up. It's worth $740 million. Could anybody use that? You know what the odds are? I looked that up too. You got a 1 in 302 million chance of winning the Mega Millions jackpot. Math says that hope ain't going to come to pass. That's just kind of a wish. And here's what a wish is. A wish is a desire that you have against reality. Which is why most wishes never, ever, ever come true. But in the Bible, hope is something much different than that. In fact, hope is something much stronger than that. Let me do a little bit of technical work here for you. The Old Testament written in Hebrew, and one of the Hebrew words for hope in the Old Testament is the word yachal. Now, this comes up all over the Old Testament. Let me give you just one example. In Psalm 31, verse 24, it says, Be strong and take heart, all you who, and then here's the term, hope in the Lord. And the Hebrew term behind this word hope is the word yakal. Now, I want you to notice something. I read Psalm 31, verse 24 out of the New International Version of the Bible. I want to read to you this same verse out of a different translation of the Bible. This is from the English Standard Version of the Bible. Same verse, Psalm 31, verse 24. Be strong and let your heart take courage, all you who, and then notice, this is the same Hebrew term, yakal, but the translation shifts. It's no longer hope. It's what? It's wait for the Lord. This is one Hebrew term that is translated in two different ways. And so here's the question. Which translation is the correct translation? Is yakal best translated as hope or wait? And the answer is yes. Because in the Bible, hope is not just a wish for something that might happen, but probably won't happen. Here's what hope is in the Bible. It is when you wait for something that God has promised will happen. And this is the kind of hope that the angel actually wants to give to Zechariah in his doubts. In fact, when Zechariah is wrestling with his doubts and expressing his doubts, the angel responds to Zechariah, and I love this because the angel gets a little huffy with Zechariah. Luke 1, verse 19, the angel says to him, Do you know who I am? I am Gabriel. I'm one of the most famous angels and God's council of angels. Here's my card. And I stand in the presence of God, which means that I know a thing or two about what God is going to do. And I have been sent to speak to you and to tell you all about this good news. But now you're going to be silent and you're not going to be able to speak until the day that this happens. Not being able to speak for a pastor, that sounds awful, okay? Trust me, it sounds awful, okay? But this is Gabriel's punishment. And here's why it's his punishment. Because, the angel says, you did not believe my words. You are filled with doubt. But then, I love the last line of what Gabriel says to Zechariah, because he says, here's what you need to know about my words. It's not that my words might come true at their appointed time. It's not that my words could come true at their appointed time. It's that my words absolutely will come true at their appointed time. You're going to have a baby. All you got to do is wait. Which means that all you really need to overcome your doubts is hope. You see, here's what happened to Zechariah. I think this happens to a lot of us. For years and decades, Zechariah and Elizabeth, they would pray and pray and pray that they'd be able to have a baby. But eventually, when they couldn't have a baby in time, they just kind of figured that they had run out of time. And so what happened was that the hope that they once had melted into doubt. But here's what Zechariah forgot, and here's what so many of us forget. Sometimes things don't work on our time. Instead, they only work on God's time. And here's the beauty of things working on God's time. As long as we're on God's time, we always have a reason to hope. Here's kind of the best way I know how to explain it. So a couple of years ago, when my wife Melody and I, when we were getting ready to move from where we were living, which was in San Antonio, up here to Georgetown to come and be and to work at Zion, we were looking for a house. And so we got connected with this local realtor. Some of you may have heard of him before, Josh Hobroch. Anybody ever heard that name before? He also happens to be our current connections coordinator, and Josh does an awesome job. In fact, if he isn't here, can we just give him a hand for the amazing work that he does? So we come to Josh with, like, you know, all the normal things that buyers come to a realtor with. We have our list of desires, or, you know, demands, whatever you want to call them, right? Okay, so we wanted our master bedroom to be downstairs if we were going to live in a 2-story house, because it's really fine if mommy and daddy are downstairs and the kids are upstairs. That was fine with us. We also wanted a fireplace in our house because Melody, my wife, gets a little chilly during the winter, and so she loves a nice roaring fire. And then here was the other thing that I really wanted, and if you don't believe me, you can ask Josh. I really did say this to him. I wanted a house that was close to H-E-B. Because I go there every day, because we're always forgetting something. So that was very important. And so I had this whole timeline worked out in my mind. Here's the way it was going to work. I was going to be able to, you know, sell our house in San Antonio. We were going to be able to close on a house here in Georgetown. It was going to work out real smooth. Guess what? It didn't work out real smooth, because we were looking and looking and looking for a house, and we couldn't find a house. We actually put an offer in on a house that we didn't really like, and then we withdrew the offer. And finally, Melody and I were beginning to experience a little bit of doubts. Doubt that we were ever going to be able to find a house that we really, really liked. And Josh was beginning to experience a little bit of doubt. Doubt that he was ever going to be able to get rid of these clients who were, like, way too picky. And so finally, when we kind of ran out of time, because this was taking, in my mind, too much time, we finally decided to, you know, just get a rental house and keep on looking. So we got a rental house. We moved here in January 2023. January came and January went, still no house. February came and February went, still no house. March came and March went, still no house. Finally, at the very beginning of April, this house came on the market. Now this house had actually been on the market, but they had dropped the price right into our price range. And so we looked at the house, and it was like perfect. Master bedroom, bottom floor. Kids upstairs, very good. Fireplace, it was a gas fireplace, which is great because Melody can just turn it on and off. And it's 1.3 miles from H-E-B, which is really, really good for me, because I went there twice yesterday. I'm not making that up. I went there 2 times yesterday. And so we put in an offer on a house, and at first the buyers rejected the offer because I'd kind of lowballed it because it was kind of at the top of our price range. And then, I'm not making this up either, they find out I'm a pastor here, and so they accept the offer. And we get the offer, and we close on the house on April 27th, 2023. April 27th, 2023. 8 days later, May 8th, 2023. This happens. Take a look up here on the screens. A storm rolls through the city of Georgetown, and lightning actually hits the chimney on the house. It explodes the chimney. See that? Fell right to the ground. Okay, set the attic on fire. In fact, here's a picture of the attic. It has a big old hole in it that you can see light through it. And then it blew a hole through the master bedroom. Here's a picture of the hole the lightning blew through the master bedroom of the rental house that we had just moved out of. Now, I've thought about this a lot. And here's what I've come to understand. Man, I thought finding a house was taking way too much time. I was so frustrated. But I'll tell you what, if we wouldn't have waited, we wouldn't have got the really great house that we have, and that would make me sad. But if we would have stayed in that rental house any longer, that would have been really, really bad. It turns out that things turned out in our house buying experience to work out at just the right time. Galatians 4, beginning at verse 4. But when the time set had fully come, at just the right time, God sent his Son. And he was born of a woman to redeem those, to rescue those, to save those who had broken God's law. You know, the story of Christmas is the story of many things, but one of the things the story of Christmas is it's the story of time. And how it all unfolded at just the right time. And all the world had to do was wait for it. The one thing the world was called to have was hope, even when it was tempted to doubt. In fact, I kind of got to close the loop here on the story of Zechariah, and I know I'm going long, and I always go long, but I promise we're almost done here. So Zechariah, some of you may know this. He and Elizabeth, they have their baby, and it's interesting because the angel Gabriel, after he comes to Zechariah, he seems to be really busy at this time in history, because 6 months after he appears to Zechariah, he appears to this girl. Anybody know what the girl's name is? Anybody have any guesses? Mary. And he talks to Mary about a baby that she's going to have too. This is in Luke 1 verse 31. Gabriel says to Mary, "You're going to conceive and give birth to a son, and you are to give him the name Jesus." Now Jesus, kind of like John, is a miracle baby because Zechariah and Elizabeth are too old. Jesus is a miracle baby too because Mary is a virgin, which defies like every bit of biology. And so Zechariah and Elizabeth, they have their baby, and Mary, and then Joseph, they have Jesus, their baby. And this actually takes us back to that guy that I mentioned at the very beginning of the message, Herod, that guy who was always worried about threats to his power. Well, he began to hear about these miraculous births, and he also heard that these miraculous births were like a portend of a divine king who was going to come from heaven to earth. And because Herod didn't hold power lightly, Herod didn't care if the king was a divine king. Herod didn't care if the king was God's king. Herod didn't even care if at this point in history the king was nothing more than a baby. He was going to wipe out and stamp out every single threat he could find out to his throne. And so some of you may know this story too. In the Gospel of Matthew, chapter 2, you can read all about it. Herod issues this awful edict where he demands and commands that all babies in the region 2 years of age and under be killed, just to make sure not even a baby could usurp the power of his throne. Now, the baby that Herod's ultimately looking for is Jesus. He's the divine king. And so Mary and Joseph, what they do is they head south. They flee to Egypt. But Zechariah and Elizabeth have a problem too, because remember, these two kids are only 6 months apart. Which means that Zechariah would fall under this edict too. John should be killed by Herod. Now, here's where the history begins to get just a little bit fuzzy. But I want to share with you a church tradition that dates all the way back to the 2nd century. So the church has been thinking about this and believing in this for a pretty long time. There's this one church tradition that says when Zechariah hears about Herod's edict, he tells Elizabeth to take John and to head for the hills, like literally. And so she goes out and she hides out in a mountain with John. And when Herod's soldiers start coming looking for babies, everybody knows about Zachariah and Elizabeth and their miracle baby. And so when one of Herod's soldiers finds Zachariah, he says, hey, turn over the kid. And when Zachariah doesn't, he's killed. In fact, ancient Christian art actually depicts this scene. I want to show you a picture. This is from the 9th century. It's actually in an ancient book of homilies, and I'll kind of walk through the picture here for you. There should be an arrow that comes up all the way over on the left. That is King Herod. And then in the middle of the picture, another arrow, that is Elizabeth with her son John, and they're kind of hiding out in the mountains. And then all the way over on the right, another arrow, that is Zachariah. And then one final arrow, there's Herod's soldier with his spear. Zechariah went from being a man who doubted that they were ever going to be able to have a baby, to being a man who was so filled with hope. And what that baby that they just had was going to do. Because by this point, Zechariah knew, even though it hadn't happened yet, he knew for certain. He was just waiting on it. Because he knew that his son was going to be the one to prepare the way for the Lord to come. And you know what? John did get it done. Because John prepared the way for a baby who was born just 6 months after him. John prepared the way for Jesus. And Zechariah was willing to die for that hope. Because that's the power of hope. That's the difference hope can make. So here's what I'll leave you with this morning. What doubt are you struggling with? Where have you lost hope? We all got those points, right? Is it the sickness? Is it the relationship? Maybe you're just kind of living with a general malaise, right? Because everything feels terrible and you wonder and worry about whether or not anything is ever going to get better. I cannot promise you how God is going to deal with your sickness or deal with that relationship or deal with your malaise. But here's what I can promise you. He'll deal with it. He'll answer your prayers. In His way and on His time. Listen, whatever it is you're struggling with, you really only got two options, right? One, you can just give up. That's called doubt. Two, you can wait on God. That's called hope. Choose wisely. And by the way, if you're struggling choosing hope, if doubt is something that you find yourself falling into, I know someone who'd like to do a gift exchange with you. And it's a great exchange. Let's stand and pray. Heavenly Father, doubt is something we all struggle with. We all got these moments, these struggles where we cry out to you and we go, God, it feels like you don't care. God, I wonder if you're even there. Father, as the world waited for Jesus, they found that hope was real. As we wait on you, may we find that hope is real too, and we ask it in Jesus' name. Amen.